Oh. Good evening, Chuck. Good evening, everyone. You hear me well? Awesome, awesome. So another month passed and I'm back on the Revolution Radio with a new portion of Frankie's stories. So I hope we all are ready for it. So, what comes to mind when you hear the word Dracula? Maybe a tall man in a cape, slick back hair, fangs, and the questionable Transylvanian accent, I want to suck your blood. or maybe the idea of bats, castles, and the supernatural. But here's the thing. None of those cliches existed before Bram Stoker's Dracula, the book that was written in 1897. One Irish writer who was more used to theater ledgers and stage lights than dark castles created that character so enduring that more than a century later he still stalks our books, screens, and imaginations. Tonight we'll start with exploring the man behind the myth, Bram Stoker himself. Bram Stoker was born in 1847 in Dublin, Ireland, in the middle of so-called the Great Famine, which was not the famine, by the way. So if someone is interested in this topic, I suggest we listen to brilliant Irish singer Sinead O'Connor and her song that is named Famine. But it's a conversation for a different night. So Bram Stoker's early years was spent in bed because of mysterious childhood illness that left him too weak to walk. He recovered by the age of 7, and when he did, it was like someone had hit fast forward. He grew into a tall, athletic young man, excellent at sports at Trinity College, Dublin. But sports were not his only passion. Stoker was also fascinated by storytelling, legends, and the theater. So after the university, he worked as a civil servant by day and at night reviewed plays for Dublin Evening Mail. His reviews caught the eye of one man in particular, the famous Shakespearean actor Harvey Irving. So Irving invited Stoker to manage his London theatre, the Lyceum, a job that would last for nearly 3 decades for Stoker. This theatre life was Stoker's world, the dramatic lighting, the costumes, constant travel, all of it quietly feeding his imagination. He also wrote 7 novels, several short stories, and a biography of Harry Irving. But none of those works came close to the impact of the book he published in 1897, Dracula. Prior to writing the novel, Stoker researched extensively, comprising an outline of the novel's opening. It's told through diary entries, letters, and newspaper clippings, what's called an epistolary style. This made the story feel real to Victorian readers, almost like they were reading an actual case file. In the late 19th century, readers were fascinated by found documents, fiction, where a story pretended to be based on real papers. So by presenting Dracula as a bundle of private writings, Stoker gave the novel a sense of authenticity, as if the events really happened and we are piecing them together from her first-hand accounts. This was important because vampires were not a mainstream literary subject back in the day, so Stoker wanted to ground that supernatural in believable detail. So the epistolary form also let Stoker switch from different narrators, Jonathan, Mina, Seward, Van Helsing, giving readers access to various points of view. This creates dramatic irony. We often know things one character doesn't, and it builds tension. By letting the horror creep in through diary entries and letters, the reader experiences events as the characters discover them, without an all-knowing narrator. This makes the fear more immediate and immersive because it's told by people living through it, not by someone who already knows the ending. We also need to take into account the Victorian tech fascination. The 1890s were a time of rapid technological change. Telegraphs, typewriters, phonograph recordings, and Stoker wove everything into his narrative, showing how modern tools were being used to fight ancient evil. So the epistolary format let him naturally include these cutting-edge technologies as part of the plot. Stoker's structure makes the reader an active participant, piecing together clues, connecting threads, and feeling like part of the investigation. And this detective life engagement is one of the reasons the novel's mystery and horror stay compelling even after more than a century. Stoker stated that it took him about 3 years to write the novel, and it's likely that he wrote most of the manuscript during the summer holidays in Cruden Bay in Scotland from 1893 to 1896. And Stoker generally wrote in spare times from his duties as Irving's business manager. Let's take a worldwide tour through the story itself. It begins with a young English solicitor named Jonathan Harker. He's sent on what should be a routine business trip to the Carpathian Mountains. His task? To help a nobleman named Count Dracula purchase an estate in England. The journey is long and strange. Villagers cross themselves when they hear the Count's name, pressing crucifixes into his hands as if sending him to the gallows. When Harker finally reaches the castle, it looms high on a cliff, its towers stabbing at the clouds. The Count himself is a courteous host, pale, tall, with piercing eyes, but there is something wrong. The castle has no servants, the doors are locked from outside, and when Jonathan cuts himself shaving, Dracula's polite smile twisted to something hungry. Harker realizes the truth. He's a prisoner, and his host is no man at all, but a creature that drinks blood to live. By the time Dracula slips away to England by ship, Jonathan is half mad and barely escapes with his life. Meanwhile, in the seaside town of Whitby, Jonathan's fiancée, Mina, is visiting her friend, Lucy. Lucy is beautiful and sweet, but suddenly she becomes ill. She grows pale, weak, wasting away despite the care of doctors. So desperate, the doctor calls in his old mentor, the eccentric and brilliant Professor Van Helsing. Van Helsing suspects something no one else dares to believe. Lucy is being preyed upon by a vampire. Then they try to protect her with garlic, with crucifixes, with constant watch, but one night she is found dead. Only she doesn't stay that way. Children begin disappearing, whispering about the lady in white who lures them in the dark. Heartbroken but resolute, her friends track Lucy to her lair, drive a stake through her heart, and release her soul. So the hunt for the Count begins. Mina, now married to Jonathan, becomes Dracula's next target. She is marked by his bite, which became a strange connection between them. And using her visions, Van Helsing and others trace Dracula's movements back to his ship, then to his estate, blah, 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 blah. I won't go into spoilers any further. but in the end, the evil is gone. The shadow lifts, but the story never dies. So what were Bram Stoker's inspirations? Picture London in the 1890s. Gas lamps hissing in the fog, cabs clattering over wet cobblestones, And inside the British Museum reading room, a tall Irishman bent over a pile of books so strange they look like they belong in the occult library. So that man is Bram Stoker, and he's on a hunt. For months he's been chasing a shadow, and he doesn't yet know its face, but he wants to write a gothic story, bigger than any ghost on gold before it, something ancient, something that whispers across the continents. He starts with history. In an old volume about Eastern Europe, Stoker stumbles upon a name, Dracula. The book tells of a 15th century prince, Vlad III of Wallachia, Vlad the Impaler, who defended his land with merciless cruelty. The detail that hooks Stoker isn't the impalements, but the title, Dracula, son of the dragon. Imagine the year 1431, a small Transylvanian town. Snow drapes the rooftops. In a candlelit chamber, a boy is born. A boy whose name will once freeze blood in the veins of his enemies. Vlad Dracula. His father, Vlad Dracula, is no ordinary nobleman. He wears the medallion of the Order of the Dragon, a secretive brotherhood sworn to defend Christianity against the Ottoman Turks. But in the whispers of the marketplace, dragon and devil are the same word, drac. And so the people murmur that Dracula's son is the son of the devil. When Vlad was 18 years old, the world tilts. He and his brother, Radu, are taken hostage by the Ottoman Sultan. Imagine the journey, pulled from the mountains of home to the Golden Dome's Edirne. Surrounded by strange language, strange food, strange custom, his brother Radu bends easily, becoming the Sultan's companion. But Vlad doesn't bend. His dark eyes burn with a quiet, growing hatred. Years later, he returns to Wallachia, a small kingdom balanced on a knife's edge between the Ottoman Empire and the powerful Kingdom of Hungary. The land is poor, the politics treacherous, the enemies pressed from all sides. And Vlad decides that fear will be his shield, so he begins his reign with terror. A thief caught stealing, impaled. A corrupt noble plotting treachery, impaled. An army of Ottoman prisoners, impaled. Tens of thousands of them in neat grim rows along the roads. The stakes rise like a forest of death, the bodies swaying in the wind with their faces frozen in agony. When the Ottoman Sultan himself marches against him in 1462, his army sees the stench of death rolls across the plain. So in fear, the Sultan turns back. But Vlad's cruelty isn't random. In his mind, it's justice. He leaves a golden cup at a public fountain, day after day, and no one dares to touch it. In a kingdom ruled by fear, crime stopped existing. In 1476, his enemies finally catch him. Vlad dies in a battle. His body hacked down, his head is sent to the Sultan as a trophy. But his legend, that doesn't die. In Romania, he's still remembered as a defender, a ruler who kept foreign invaders at bay. In the West, his name becomes a byword for savagery. And centuries later, in the British Museum reading room, a certain Irish writer will come across that name, Dracula, and wonder, what if a man doesn't need stakes or swords to kill? What if he only needs his teeth? But the inspiration came not only from the story of Vlad the Impaler, then come the superstitions. From a Scottish writer named Emily Gerard, he learns of Romanian legends, strigoi, undead spirits that claw their way out of the grave to drink blood, and the word that sends a little shiver through him, Nosferatu. He reads about burial rites, coffins filled with native earth, and midnight visitations that leave the victims pale and hollow-eyed. But Stoker is not content with folklore. He knows that in the theater, it's not enough for a villain to be monstrous. He also must be magnetic. And Bram just has the model, Henry Irving, the celebrated actor for whom Stoker manages the Lyceum Theater. Irving can hold an audience silent with a single gesture, his tall figure and cold smile making every listener lean in closer. Stoker has seen women swooning when Irving fixes them with his gaze. Yes, his count will need that power, the aristocrat's charm, to draw you in before the predator strikes. Friends feed his imagination too. Over dinner, a Hungarian scholar tells Bram the tales of Ottoman battles, remote Carpathian mountains, and travelers who vanish in strange borderlines. So Stoker takes notes. He studies early vampire tales, John Polidori's The Vampire, where the blood drinker walks in drawing rooms, not graveyards, Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla, where seduction and death twine together. And then late one night, perhaps they say after eating too much crab, a dream comes to him. A tall, thin figure bends over a sleeping woman, lips just touching her throat, and she opens her eyes in terror or ecstasy, he can tell. When he wakes, he knows the shadow he has been chasing finally has a name. So piece by piece, like a craftsman, Bram Stoker takes history, legend, and faces of men he knows, and the whispered fears of his own Victorian era, disease, the foreign invader, the dangerous allure of forbidden desire, and hammers them into one being. An ancient nobleman with the mind of a general, the manners of a gentleman, and the hunger of a beast. Count Dracula. Another interesting theme to cover is Dracula's castle, but here is a twist. Bram Stoker never actually visited Transylvania, and Dracula doesn't describe any one real castle in great detail. The inspiration is a mix of historian research, imagination, and later tourism marketing. Nevertheless, the most popular Dracula's castle is considered to be the Bran Castle in Romania, and it attracts hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. Perched on a rocky hill in central Romania, with turrets and winding staircases, it looks like the kind of a place Dracula would live. But there is no evidence Stoker knew about Bran Castle. So the association comes from Romanian tourism in the late 20th century, linking the book to the real life. Vlad the Impaler, who has no proven connection to Bran Castle either. The actual stronghold most linked to Vlad III, Dracula in history, is Poinari Castle. Now it's ruined fortress high above the Arges River. Vlad used it as one of his main residences, and it fits the remote clifftop imagery Stoker described. Again, Stoker never saw it, but historians suspect he might have read accounts of Wallachian fortresses like Poinari when he was doing his research. And another possible real-life influence is Slains Castle in Scotland. In 1895, Stoker visited Slains Castle, a ruin on the edge of the North Sea cliffs. The octagonal room and the dramatic sea views may have helped shape his mental picture of Gothic fortress. So this is actually one of the few castles we know Stoker actually walked through before writing Dracula. So let's talk about the influence of Bram Stoker's work. When Dracula first hit Chelsea in 1897, Bram Stoker couldn't have known he created a monster that would live forever. The book was very well reviewed, but it wasn't a runaway bestseller. It was just one more gothic novel in a crowded market. Until the stage lights brought him back to life. So there were stage adaptations in 1924 and 1927, and then the Hollywood noticed. Universal Pictures signed the actor Lugosi for the 1931 film version, which became the vampire image. But I know that we don't have much time, but I wanted to cover my favorite adaptation, which was made in 1992, and it stars brilliant actor Gary Oldman. This Dracula wasn't just a predator, he was a tragic century-old lover seeking his lost bride. And film's rich costumes, strange practical effects, and romance won 3 Oscars and made over 215 million worldwide. Yeah. So why has this story lasted more than a century? That's the secret to his immortality. Dracula adapts. He absorbs the fears, fashions, and fascinations of every era. From a romantic hero in the 1979 Frank Langella film, a family-friendly host in Sesame Street's Count Von Count, a bumbling dad in Hotel Transylvania animated films, a final boss in Castlevania video games. He sold cereal-inspired Halloween costumes and even turned into a Lego minifigure. So when Stoker died in 1912, he had no idea his vampire would outlive him by centuries. So, so Bram Stoker's Dracula isn't just a horror novel, it's a cultural landmark. And maybe somewhere in the dark, in the back of our minds, we can still hear the echo. I'm Dracula, and I welcome you to my house. No. Oh. Oh, thank you so much, Chuck. I wish I could talk about it forever. Another hour. going more. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Chuck. Thank you for having me. Lads, thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate it. I love you all. Thank you for all the support that you give me. Deidre, Raul, love you all. Christina, Simon. Good night.